Welcome to FNB Money Moves, a podcast series where we're going to help you make better money decisions. I'm Maya Fischer-French.
And I'm Ester Ochse.
And we're going to solve the world's problems.
Or at least start with your finances.
Okay, all right, let's start with the finance. The financial problem we're going to solve today is making sure that you understand how your home loan works, and especially if you have an access bond.
Yeah, Maya, you and I were talking about this recently, is that there's a lot of nuances around this, and it really is important, that a person gets to grip with how their home loan works and how vital it is in their long-term wealth creation.
Absolutely, and I was wondering why I've been getting so many questions about people about their access bond, and I think a lot of people are drawing down either times are tough or for solar. And maybe they're trying to access it now and now finding that, I don't know exactly how this works.
Yeah. So let's take a step back. I think an access bond or a bond is, first of all, the first step to proper wealth creation. That home is the first big purchase you're ever going to make. But an access bond is powerful for a couple of reasons. First of all, you're building this major asset. Then, of course, you can prepay funds into it. So a great place to keep your emergency savings. And I agree with you at the moment, is I think times are tough out there. There's inflation, there's all of those other things, and solar. So people are drawing down against it, and it is important that they do understand that.
Yeah, exactly how it works. And I'm curious, we're talking about solar, and by the way, we did exactly that. We drew down for the solar, best thing I've ever done. But are there other ways that people are using their access bonds? I was quite curious to ask you.
You can use your access bond quite nicely. So there's the first thing that you can do is obviously put your emergency savings in there. And the advantage of putting your emergency savings in there is you're saving interest over the long run. Whereas if you put it in a normal savings account, you're potentially not going to get the same sort of rate. So let's break it down into numbers. Best money market rate that you can get at the moment, to say, is 6.5%, whereas prime rate is sitting at, say, 10.75%. So a bit of an opportunity cost there. Put that money into your bond, you're saving basically 4%. And that's the first thing that you can do with an access bond. The second thing, and I think this is very powerful, and this is where debt is such a powerful tool that a person can use. You can, as you busy pay off your bond, you can leverage up against that, and then you can diversify assets. So you can potentially buy a second property, or alternatively what you can do is do a share portfolio, but obviously get advice around that as well.
Absolutely. So you've got your traditional emergency funds, and we're going to be bringing on an expert just now to tell us the technical side of things, because sometimes emergency funds are a bit tricky with an access bond because there is a period of time that you actually can't draw down on your prepaid funds just before your debit order goes through. But don't worry, we'll be going through all of that to explain it in more detail. So you've got the emergency fund, but I also look at how I use mine. Obviously, I build up prepaid funds maybe I want to do renovations on the house. So for me, I kind of see that as a little bit of a buffer. I also see that if I'm putting in money, additional money, when the interest rates rise, I'm largely protected from it. And that's been quite critical.
100%. So, going into COVID a couple of years ago, we had that massive reduction in interest rates. And the advice that we gave to our clients is keep your repayment at that level, because you're getting used to it, you're paying prepaid into your funds, and then you protect it as it goes up. So the more money you can put into your interest, into your bond and into your access bond, the better it is for you, because you are saving an interest in that long-term benefit.
And another thing people do is school fees. We did as well. That's another one. We love our access bond. So school fees, every month, so we work out, next year what the school fees will cost us. And then every month we allocate a portion of our budget and we put it into our access bond. And then in January, we draw out the amount, and we usually get like a 5%, keep lowering the amount, they'll give a discount. You get at least 5% discount on school fees. And what's nice, school fees are done. If we run into a financial difficulty that year, at least our kids can stay in school.
And that's a great way of doing it. And what the advantage again there is, you've got, first of all, this long-term interest rate saving, because interest is calculated daily, compounded monthly, which is fantastic. So as you're busy building up the school fees in there, you're actually saving interest in the long run. Doesn't sound like a lot, but sort of $200, $500, 750 Rand a month over a 10, 15-year period, that's significant. That's proper.
And I want to just unpack that for a second. You mentioned the daily compounding, and people don't understand that. By the way, the bank always wins on this one. So when you put money into a bank account and you get interest, they compound monthly. But if you are borrowing money from the bank, they actually compound daily, which is why even if you get paid on the 25th and your debit order for your mortgage goes off on the 30th, move it to the 25th. Because even those 5 days make a difference.
Spot on. And that's actually general advice, not only for your home loan, it's for any debit order that you have, is try and move it as close as possible to pay date. So if you get paid on the 25th, have all your debit orders, your vehicle finance, your home finance. If you can move your insurance, so that's out of mind, out of way, and then you've got money for the rest of the month.
Absolutely. And it is that over time, that factor of that extra day. So Esther, we've been speaking about perhaps sort of pre-funding future things like school fees. But a lot of people use it to consolidate debt or even to purchase a car. What's your feelings on using it as basically a credit facility?
Okay, so I think what's important here is it comes down to discipline, but let's unpack it a little bit more. You need to look at the total cost of credit over the period of the loan. So a home loan, traditionally 20 years, you're going to pay your interest, you're going to pay your monthly fee, account fees, all of that. And then there's going to be a total cost of credit.
It's usually double.
It can be, depending on what your interest rate is, it can be up to double, which is also beneficial to pay it off earlier so that you save that interest rate. If you are now financing a car through them, the advantage of financing a car through a home loan is you're going to potentially pay slightly less. But it's going to be a percentage.
Finance is usually a little bit above prime.
A little bit above.
Maybe getting a little bit below prime.
So
2-3%.
If even. But the difficulty is you're now taking an asset that's a depreciating asset and financing it over potentially 20 years. So the total cost of credit on that vehicle is now shooting through the roof. So instead of paying car value plus sort of 5 years worth of financing costs, you're now paying car value plus 20 years of financing cost, or depending on how much is outstanding on your bond. So if you do that, you need to be very, very disciplined in order to pay off that car. So if you're going to pay the car or your car installment to say 4,000 or 5,000 rand a month, pay that into your bond, and you've got to be disciplined not to take that money out of there.
And as a prepayment, so because from FNB's perspective, you would actually see that as a prepaid.
We'd see it as prepaid.
So there's this temptation, and people also say to me, should I build up, should I have my emergency funds, my bond, and all that? And I'm saying, be careful you're aligning your goals. If you want your mortgage paid off quicker because you've got a goal to pay your mortgage off over 15 years, make sure you're not sabotaging that by doing things like you're now financing the car and you're thinking it's coming down, but actually it's car finance. It gets messy.
Or alternatively, you suddenly feel like you need a holiday and you're going on a holiday out of your bond. It is messy.
Yeah.
It is messy. So that's the one thing.
Discipline works, but only if you have discipline.
Discipline
seems
works.
to be how we can say it about most finances. It works, but have discipline.
Well, I think that's everything when it comes to exactly what you say is you need to do that. So car, yes, but do your numbers, be careful, be disciplined. Let's talk about debt consolidation. And then again, we're starting to talk about this secured bond versus unsecured personal loan, revolving loan, all of those. Again, the advantage of putting it into a bond is you're going to pay a lower interest rate and. The difficulty with that is you are now potentially financing, again, something that's 3 years over 20 years. Shoots your cost of credit right through the roof. So discipline again. Absolutely, if it's the only way that you're going to make it to the end of the month and you need to look at debt consolidation, your bond is an option, but it should be the last option. It shouldn't be the first option. There's other things that you can do for debt consolidation, personal loans, all of that, and we've got all those offers.
And I do think, yes, exactly that it can save you, but where possible, keep short-term credit separate from long-term credit.
100%. And to a point that you had, Nana, in terms of your long-term goals, 100%. If you want to pay your mortgage off earlier, it's great. But remember, you don't want to pay it off too quickly because there are longer-term investment options as well.
Okay, so we're going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. So somebody was saying, right, I'm aggressively paying off my mortgage. And I said, what about your investments, like offshore investing? 100%. Are you sacrificing all your investment options because all you're doing is taking all your disposable income and settling your mortgage? There has to be a balance.
100%. And that's coming back to that whole leveraging thing. So it's great that you're paying off your mortgage, you're saving on interest and all of that. But your mortgage is at probably a prime rate or maybe slightly above prime rate. Let's use the example of, say, 10% because the calculation's easy. So 10%. If you have a longer term investing view, so you're investing for retirement 15, 20, 30 years away, and you can potentially get, say, on average 10% in a balanced fund or 12% in a balanced fund over 10, 20, 30 years, that's significant numbers. That's a big difference
in
in numbers.
Compounding, you know,
that compounding.
100 goes to 200, 400, 800. And I think that message is lost on people. They get obsessed with a spreadsheet and they're saying, well, I can get 10% on my bond, so therefore it's better than putting it in investment. But that compounding of that investment, and your bond's now paid off, and now you're starting 10 years later to invest, you've lost 10 years of compounding.
And we've done that calculation of someone that has started saving for retirement at 25 as opposed to someone that starts saving for retirement at 45. I mean, the person that saves at 45 needs to contribute, I think it's 400% of what the person needs to save at 25. So don't discount that absolute, I think it was Einstein that said the power of compounding interest. It's a phenomenally powerful tool. So what I'd suggest to the viewers out there is, if they've got extra money, split it. Take half, pay off your bond, or pay for the school fees, something like that. Other half, think about your longer term investment goals. You know, and we'll unpack it in the series as well. You know, things like tax-free savings account, powerful tool that you can use. Share investing, offshore, which you spoke to, lots of options there that you can look at.
So one of the things we do, just to close off that topic, is we actually we put extra into our mortgage every month, and once a year we actually take out a lump sum and put it offshore, because often you're proper offshore, you need lump sums, those debit orders don't work for that. So I think it is about making sure that you're finding a balance. Well, Esther, this fantastic conversation, but I have now been asked by my followers, I have a list of questions that I need answered that are very technical. So we're bringing in FNB's home loan expert, Mfundo Mabaso, to give us the technical details on your access bond. So we're back with FNB home loan expert, Mfundo Mabaso. And I've asked Mfundo to join us because Mfundo, I wrote an article about access bonds and I have had so many questions coming back. So I thought, well, rather than bugging you and the team, I'll just get you on here and we can unpack them, because what's very obvious to me is that this is technical and people don't really understand how their home loan works. Yeah. So I'm going to start off with this question. And this is one that I get quite frequently. So this is where, when interest rates increases are announced, which we've had a lot of in the last 18 months, people see their rate that they're paying, the installment, increasing twice. And it's very confusing. So just maybe unpack how interest rate increases actually reflect on your home loan statement.
So we charge interest on a daily basis. So we calculate interest on a daily basis and then only bill you once a month. So that basically means whatever your prevailing rate is on day 1, day 2, day 3, and if the interest rate changes on day 20, of the month, we would have accumulated or calculated interest for 20 days. For the remaining period, we would then calculate interest daily on the new interest rate, which then is accumulated and will bill you at the end of the month. So there'd be a blend between old interest rate for the first 20 days and for the last 10 or 12 days would be the new interest rate, which would then reflect in your repayment. So what would happen is that you'd have almost 3 different repayments for the first month, which was the old interest rate altogether, then the blended interest rate, new repayment, and then the new interest rate in the new month with the full interest rate. So that's what technically happens. It's because we charge you or calculate interest on a daily basis, bill you once, and so as things change, we then take that into account on a daily basis.
So you're not being charged twice for the same interest. That's what people are saying. They're saying they're charging me twice. No, it is that pro rata effect. Obviously, one of the topics that Esther and I have been talking about are prepaid funds. And people also, they say to me, what is the benefit? Like, how do my prepaid funds benefit me? And you know, my understanding is obviously it reduces your interest. And if you leave it and you never touch it, it also reduces the term, how long it takes you to pay back your home loan. But maybe just unpack that a little bit as well from a technical perspective.
Yeah, so I've actually answered your own question.
Of course. But we'll leave you to give the technical part.
Yeah, so I think the benefit is exactly that. So you save on 2 elements. One is the interest that we charge you over the life of the loan.
So let's explain that as well. So if this right now, I have an outstanding balance of R1 million, I would be charged 10% on that, so 100,000. If I put in a prepaid amount of 100,000, I've reduced it to 900. Now that 10% would only be 90,000. So is that exactly how the mechanism works?
That's exactly what it is. So the interest rate is charged on the outstanding balance. So the less the outstanding balance, the less interest you actually effectively pay back. So that's why prepaids are such a good way to save on interest. And then what we do from an FNB point of view is that we front foot, or we go first with saying, we'd like you to pay your loan quicker. So we don't change your repayment unless you tell us to do so. So what would then happen is that if you prepay, we then keep the repayment the same, obviously taking into account any interest rate changes, but would keep the repayment the same to make sure that you pay much quicker. So your amort curve, which is what we call the term of your loan, is that it would be sooner. So it would be shorter, and you'd pay down much quicker, which effectively means you save on interest and you save on the term that you would be paying back your loan.
But now, say, for example, we've now had so many rate increases. You've got these prepaid funds. You've been maintaining your installments because FNB does. But you've reached a point where now you actually want to tap into those prepaid funds to help you with your repayments because you're starting to struggle. How does that work?
So the best thing to do is talk to us. So come talk to the bank, whichever bank you bank with.
Saying, listen, this 15,000 Rand a month I'm not coping with, but I have prepaid funds.
Yeah. So have a conversation with the bank and we then find a solution for you. Your prepaid helps in that should you fall short in some way, you already have funds in the account and that we could tap into. But I think first things first, always talk to the bank, find a way that would help, that is agreed upon between you and the bank. You'd find that even a re-rate can happen at that time because you've been paying very well, which would actually reduce your repayment. So talking to the bank is important.
And I know FNB is one of the banks that does this, that if you've been with you for 2 years, you've been making prepaid, you've been paying ahead on your mortgage, your credit score is looking good, you could even negotiate a lower interest rate.
You can. You certainly can. And it's always a good thing to just have a money management conversation with the bank to say, look, here's where I'm struggling, here's what I need, and we'd actually take a very positive look at where you are and how can we actually help you.
So you can, after 2 years, consider going to FNB if you've been putting in prepaid and maybe your credit score's actually improved, and have a discussion about actually having your rate reduced. But I imagine it's T's and C's apply.
Yeah, no, definitely T's and C's do apply. So we take a holistic view of how you've conducted yourself, where you are in your money journey, and for those customers who are in good standing, we'd look at that favorably.
So Mfundo, one thing that confuses people a lot is about what happens to these prepaid funds when you get close to paying off your mortgage. So do you reach a point where perhaps your prepaid funds are, say, 100,000 and your outstanding balance is 100,000? So there's a net kind of zero.
Yeah.
What happens at that point?
Yeah. Okay. So effectively, but let's start here. Prepaid is your money. So it's money that you've paid in a little bit extra. Your balance is money that you still owe the bank. If we get to the point where your outstanding balance and your prepaid are the same, effectively you owe nothing. But that means your prepaid has now paid off quicker than was actually required, your outstanding balance. So you can do one of two things. You can cancel it, and you then zeroized. It's already at zero, and all you do is that you pay the cancellation fees with the title at the deeds office.
So it's about 5,000 Rand or something, or 5 to 10,000 Rand.
It varies, but it's around 5,000 Rand.
5,000, and then you get your title deed back. There's no longer a mortgage over your property, and you're walking away.
You're square.
Yeah.
But there's a benefit to keeping your facility open. So for that period, what would then happen is that your prepaid would effectively pay off what is still outstanding for the remaining term. And should you need to actually access your re-advance or borrow against your facility, there's nothing additional other than just a reassessment from the bank. So you keep it open, and there is no debit order running
except 69 Rand a month fees,
which is the 69 Rand, which is a
facility
admin
fee.
Yes.
And is that a debit order? Would that run off my account as a debit order?
Depending on where you're sitting. So if you've got enough prepaid to cover it, there's no debit order running.
Okay. Do you have to have a conversation with the bank at this point?
At this point, you don't.
Okay, so I'll wake up one morning and I just won't have a debit order. I'll say, I'm rich.
Yes.
There's no debit order going off my bank account.
Yes.
So it just happens automatically.
It will happen automatically.
Okay.
But should you need something from the bank, then it is advisable. So there are facilities that are available on the app, but at times you might need to give us a call.
So what I'm thinking is, so maybe I've done this, I've got 3 years to go on my credit agreement. I think it's important to understand that this is a credit agreement of 20 years. I've got 3 years left. I've settled it. And I woke up one morning, hallelujah, I don't have a bond repayment, but I've still got 3 years of a credit facility left. So any time in those 3 years, I could pull down on that. But the minute I pull down on that, the debit order comes back in.
Yes.
Does the debit order come back in on the outstanding balance or back to the original installment?
So it goes back to the original repayment.
Okay, so even if so let's use a scenario. Say you were paying 10,000 Rand a month up till that point. You now then only pull down 50,000 Rand from the facility. You will immediately have a debit order of 10,000 Rand again, going back to the original installment agreement. So I think people get confused with that. They think it will relate to the 50,000 they've drawn down.
Yeah.
And that's important to understand.
Yeah, so it'll go back to the original repayment unless you contact the bank and indicate that you'd like to settle the
50,000 over longer.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then we will reduce your repayment to be in accordance to what you actually owe us for the remaining.
You see, it's these little things that people get shocked by or confused by. So that's why we're here. We're here to explain all of this. Very, very important. Okay, I had a big complaint and all banks do this, by the way, it's not just FNB, that a lot of people use, and Esther and I were discussing this, use their access bond as an emergency fund. And then at the end of the month, they need the money. And they come to draw these prepaid funds and they can't access all of them. Why?
So here's the technical side of things. So if you have a prepaid, we see it as something that protects you from falling into arrears above you actually using it as an emergency fund. So when we're about to debit your account, what would then happen is that there would be a lock equal to the debit order. So let's make an example. Your debit order is 10,000 Rand and you've got a prepaid amount of 11,000 Rand. What we then do is that we would hold your prepaid for 10,000 whilst we're waiting for the system to clear your debit order running from your account.
So this would be from the date the debit order goes through my account to the date it is received in my home loans account.
Correct.
I won't put you on the spot because I know you're not responsible for this, but nobody understands why within the same bank it can't be done within the same day. But there is a few days delay, and it's those few days that you won't be able to access. So it's very important to understand this with your access bond. So if you are using it for emergency funds, just be aware you need to actually take it out before your debit order goes off, bizarrely enough, or wait till the debit order is being cleared. So I think that's an important point. And another one...
But Maya, it's important to just understand the reasoning behind it. So it takes about 3 to 4 days, right? Depending on the efficiency of the banking system. But it's maybe on the day of the debit order until maybe 3 days waiting for all the funds to clear out. And why we do that is just to make sure that you don't draw the money and then there's something that goes wrong with your repayment and then you go into arrears. If for whatever reason something happens with the repayment and it doesn't clear, delays or whatever the case might be, your prepaid then covers you and you don't go into arrears, which keeps you in a good standing with the bank.
Another one that people asked me, and I don't know if this has happened in South Africa's history, why people were so concerned, but they said, can the bank, if there's, for example, a major credit crisis, which has been known, can the bank prevent me having access to my prepaid funds? We're not talking about those 3 days of the debit order. We're talking about saying, I've got 100,000 Rand sitting as prepayment in my mortgage and the bank can freeze it. Can that happen?
No, FNB will not do that. We have in the past been through credit crisis and we have not done that. I want to reiterate that prepaid is your money. You have full access to it. Terms and conditions apply, of course, but it's your money. So we would never withhold it because of some credit crisis that's happening in the world. COVID happened, we didn't do it. The credit crunch back in 2008 happened, we didn't do it as well.
So you heard it from the man himself. Question asked, question answered. And a final question, and this has come from people who don't have access bonds. So they're saying to me, Maya, I have been putting in extra money every month. I don't have an access bond, but I've just been putting in extra. I now need to access some of those prepaid amounts. How do I do that? Do I need to go and change my mortgage and change it to an access bond, or is there another easier mechanism?
Yeah, so we call it a flexi facility. Access bond is from another bank.
Oh, sorry. So listeners, I should upfront flexi facility, but I think most people as a generic term understand access bond, which is why I'm using it. So I'm not trying to pretend you're another bank.
So in effect, if you don't have a flexi facility activated on your account, what would happen is that if you have prepaid funds, you would submit an application, which is a tedious, long process. Well, not long, but it's unnecessary. So the best thing to do is to activate your flexi facility, and then you have access to your funds. But some people...
Isn't there a cost, though, to doing that?
Nope. There is no cost associated with it.
That's smart.
For some people, they know that they tend to tap into their prepaid, and so they choose not to activate it. So there is an application process which might take a couple of days to...
Oh, it's a couple of days, not from months.
No.
Okay. So that's an interesting point. So now if you... And one thing I have realized, just want to tell my followers this, is that I've realized that every bank is different. Yeah. So we're talking to FNB, and this is how FNB works. If you do not bank with FNB, maybe A, you should, but B, go speak to your bank and understand how exactly this works, because not all banks allow you to just switch into a flexi like that. Some of them would actually require you to re-register the bond, which has huge cost implications. Yes. And I like the point you're making that, maybe if I'm somebody who says, I don't really want a flexi facility because I don't have discipline, I just want to access some of those prepaid funds, it'll take me a couple of days, I follow the process. So I think really important. And what is a re-advance? How is that different?
Okay. So a re-advance is you tapping back into your into a balance that you've already paid. So you owed us 100,000 Rand, and there's still a little bit of time left before you pay us off, and then you ask us to go and tap back into the 100,000. And it is a credit assessment that needs to happen. So you're borrowing money back. So whereas a prepaid is money that is
your
yours,
money.
A re-advance would be money that you've paid back to the bank and that you want to take up again. If you do that, what would then happen is that we'd recalculate. If you're good for the credit, we'd recalculate your repayment, because now you owe us a little bit more, and your repayment would then still pay down at the same term, but just a little bit more.
So Mfundo, but how much of that, my facility, can I apply for as a re-advance? So say I took out a mortgage of 1 million, maybe 500's paid off. How much of that 500 that I've paid off can I take as a re-advance?
So you can go back to the original loan amount. So if your original loan amount was 1 million and you're now sitting at 500,000, you can go back to 1 million, which effectively means you can borrow back about 500,000. Should you want to go beyond that, it's no longer a re-advance, it's now further lending, which would then, if you're good for the credit, once again, we'd give it to you, but it's a registration at the deeds office. For
maybe costs and all the rest of it.
Then we have to engage an attorney to actually register the additional bond, which is cost associated with it.
Very important to understand the difference between a re-advance and a further loan.
That's correct. Okay.
Mfundo, thank you. You've been amazing. You've answered all my questions, and I think you really have made it a lot easier to understand. Really been great chatting.
Thank you.
You've been listening to FNB Money Moves in partnership with Maya on Money, where we help you to make better financial decisions. So make sure you tune in to our next podcast.